You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast, coming to you from Montecito, California. Slightly altered in my thinking because of some back pain and hydrocodone, but the interview itself is not affected by that. So bear with me as we get to the introduction. First, I want to remind you that there's wealthformula.com. That is a great place to go if you want to get involved with the rest of the community, including signing up for the Accredited Investor Club, which you really ought to do because we got another deal coming up in short order, which is another massively distressed opportunity, apartment building, that kind of thing. So anyway, go to wealthformula.com and do that. Now, I want to talk to you today about a concept that I have called on many occasions a wealth thermostat. The idea that individuals gravitate towards their perceived financial worth. You can see that in a lot of real world scenarios. If you look at lottery winners, for example, there's actually research that shows that a significant percentage of lottery winners eventually revert to their pre-lottery financial status within a few years. And you might say, well, gosh, it's because they don't know what they do with their money, and that's all true and so on, but they're just not used to being rich, and their brains won't let them be rich. And despite this sudden influx of wealth, these individuals often lack the internal belief system, ultimately, that they are wealthy people and that they can stay wealthy. The thermostat is at a lower level, pulls them back to where they began. Actually, there was a study by the National Endowment for Financial Education that found that approximately 70% of these lottery winners end up broke within a few years, right? On the other hand, think about DJT, Donald Trump. Like him or hate him, I got to tell you, man, that guy is one tough cookie. Getting shot in the ear, getting up, fist pumping. That is one serious tough SOB. And it doesn't surprise me that despite facing bankruptcy multiple times, he's managed to rebuild his empire each time, driven by this sort of unshakable belief that his ability to generate wealth and, frankly, to do anything he wants. His wealth thermostat is high. His life thermostat is high. And he naturally gravitates back to that level no matter what happens, demonstrating a lot of resilience and unwavering confidence. Another example on the downside is professional athletes. I mean, you hear about poor Mike Tyson. I think his net worth is like $300,000 now. And he used to make millions and millions of dollars per fights. And in a similar situation with the lottery winners, people just don't really see themselves as wealthy people. They just end up blowing it. If you've ever read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, a lot of these concepts that he explores, that, he doesn't call them the wealth thermostat as I do, but he talks about them. He emphasizes the power of thought and belief, ultimately in shaping one's financial destiny. He says that the success begins with a clear and unwavering belief in one's ability to achieve wealth. His vision of the definite major purpose really underscores the importance of having a concrete and compelling vision of financial success. And it's this vision, when internalized, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, you may or may not believe that. You may think that that's all kind of, soft stuff, but I'll tell you, it's 100% true. He'll also discuss the role of the subconscious mind in regulating our actions and outcomes. The subconscious mind influencing our beliefs and self-image ultimately acts as a powerful force in determining our financial realities. So to reset the wealth thermostat, as I say, Hill advocates ultimately for a few different things. Specifically, let me just name them. One would be to a belief system overhaul, which basically means looking at what you believe right now and challenging it. 2, visualization. Now, a lot of people use this. You get like mental images. Maybe they get a board or whatever. In my life, I've always just had a vision of the way things will turn out. And in many cases, that has happened. Education and mentorship, you've got to kind of know what you want. You got to go for it. I mean, it just doesn't happen magically. You're going to make some errors along the way, but if you're, hell bent on doing something, you're doing it. There's the environment and associations, surrounding yourself with positive people who are more successful than you, because it's like playing tennis with somebody who's better than you. It's just going to make you better. And ultimately, it's action and persistence, right? You got to push forward, and that's what's going to help you change the thermostat, right? Anyway, my guest on this week's Wealth Formula podcast is Bronson Hill, a friend of mine. Has taken a strong interest also in the psychology of the rich, and is writing a book about his observations from meeting a lot of wealthy individuals. And we're going to hear all about that after these messages.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on Wealth Formula Podcast is Bronson Hill. Bronson is managing member of Bronson Equity and a general partner in 2,000 multifamily units worth over $200 million. Co-leads a large in-person multifamily meetup in Glendale, California, called the Investor to Investor, ITI. He is the host of the Mailbox Money Show. And he has authored multiple books: Fire Yourself, Replace Your Working Income with Passive Income in 3 years or Less, and is a regular contributor on YouTube and his blog. He's also got a new book called The Rich Brain. Bronson, welcome to the show.
Buck, really glad to be here, man. I know I've had you on my show a couple times. Love talking with you, and we always talk about great stuff, whether it's biohacking or real estate or all the stuff. So love it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into this business? So you were I think you were in medical sales or something like that before.
Yeah. So I was in medical sales for 10 years. I went around, first did some physical therapy products. Then I ended up in the OR and basically doing heart surgical products. And it was great. I was making over $200K a year. I enjoyed that part of it, but I always had a desire to be an entrepreneur and also have, I think like yourself, I think our stories are similar. I think you had higher earning potential than I had at the time, but to really have something where you had assets that really, paid for you rather than you having to go earn it. And so I learned about syndication, and after doing some single family stuff and realizing that would never get me where I wanted to go, it would just take way too long and it required too much capital, that I could actually raise money from investors and do passive investing. And I was able to basically 20x my net worth and quit my great corporate job. My whole family thought I was crazy, but I got around some people that were really supportive and entrepreneurial, and I was able to leave my job in a few years.
Makes sense. I mean, that's sort of like the entrepreneurial dream, right? Let's talk about this Rich Brain book. What's this Rich Brain all about? And where can I get one?
So Rich Brain, this is the people that are watching the book covers here. So I'm right in the process of writing right now. It's how the wealthy change their brain to change their bank account. And so one thing I've had the privilege of doing, Buck, and I know you have as well, talk to over 2,500 high net worth millionaires basically, and ask questions and figure out what they're doing that's different. And what I've realized is that there's this myth, and it really is a very widely believed myth in the media, that people either come from money or they're not, or they're basically born with a silver spoon in their mouth. But the truth is, Fidelity Investments did a study in 2019, and it said 86% of millionaires are self-made. So the truth is that people that are wealthy, they didn't it wasn't just this natural thing, or they had it here and there. It's they've learned how to do this. And so this idea of, brain science, of we become what we do over time. And also, as I've studied and interviewed and watched wealthy people, there's specific beliefs, mindset, and wealth habits that they've done. And you and I had a conversation about this recently on my show, where, you said, hey, the guy who's making 100,000 will always find a way to make 100,000, right? And somebody who's making $1 million will just kind of figure out a way to make $1 million. And so there's these things in our mindset, especially, and also some specific habits that people do that have really allowed them to become wealthy. And so that's really what the book is about.
It's a wealth thermostat. That's what I like to call it. It's a thermostat, and you kind of set it. Those who are able to sort of get to the next level are uniquely capable of resetting that thermostat, whereas others can't. And that's kind of what my own theory on this is. What's the secret sauce?
Well, there's a few people are gonna have to obviously get the book to kind of get the biggest part, or get all of it, I should say. The biggest part that I found is I went through a divorce 7 years ago, 7, 8 years ago, very hard personally. I came through this experience just feeling no sense of self-worth, man. Honestly, just really no confidence, just really struggled. Like, who am I? What's going on? I mean, that's a very personal thing to share, obviously, on a show about wealth, or, your show. But I think that what I've realized is that, and Brené Brown is an author I love. She wrote the book called The Gifts of Imperfection. She's written a bunch of books about this kind of topic. But she says the difference between, she's a researcher and big academic. She said the difference between people who receive or do great things in their life and those that don't is that the first group felt worthy of it. And so you talk about it as a wealth thermostat. She wrote that on. It's a great term, Buck. I love that. I mean, you include that in the book. But the idea that, like, if I feel worthy that I can receive lots of wealth or money or jobs or careers or promotions or a great spouse, or like, I'm gonna live in such a way, and that's the world's gonna respond to me in that way. You look at really successful, like Elon Musk, or successful billionaires, whatever you think of them, like, they've positioned themselves in the world that they feel that they're worthy of whatever that thing is, and the world basically gives them that. And so there's a habit around this that you can change this, and there's different names for it. What I've kind of found is that if you want to change it, again, there's things that we know. We all, like, I think people know, hey, I'm a person who's loved, I'm a person who's valuable, I'm a person who's whatever. But the way we feel it in our head, we don't always kind of feel it deep within it. It doesn't come from within us. And the way you change that is through something called worthiness whisperings or wealth whisperings, which are basically affirmations that you create and you basically say to yourself. We all talk to ourselves. And so I have a practice of doing affirmations, whether it's in a mirror or just things I repeat to myself. And then in the beginning, I talked about my divorce. Going through this, I didn't feel that right when I started doing these. It felt cheesy. I'm saying things in the mirror. I'm talking to myself. This doesn't feel really genuine. But over time, it started to kind of get into my heart, and where it actually, after 6 months, a year, it started to kind of come from within, so I could show up in a situation. And this is, again, why a lot of times we show up to situations and we self-sabotage, or we blow the interview, or we have something doesn't work out. It's because we haven't really absorbed whatever that message is, and we haven't meditated on whatever that truth is we want to really be a part of. So again, I know you and I've talked a bit about mindset. So for some people, this could feel a little woo-woo, but I think it's incredibly important to feel you're worthy of wealth before you get it, or you're going to be like a lottery winner that gets a lot of wealth if you're lucky, and then most of these people go bankrupt, or they blow it on things that aren't important. So that's one, I think, the most critical pieces of it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the universe pays you what you think you're worth. I think that's really what happens, right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
true,
really what happens. So I was talking about this on the show recently about how, like, a lot of these things sort of you just kind of have to do something. You have to actually physically move in the direction of what it is that you want. And sometimes things just kind of work themselves out, right? And it's really remarkable how that happens. You could use the words manifestation. You could use words whatever you want. But at the end of the day, if you're sitting on a couch doing nothing, nothing's going to happen. What else? What else besides this sort of changing your wealth mindset?
Yeah. So the other things that really go with that are, there's a saying, I believe it was, I'm going to may get the person wrong, but I think it was Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. And so you say, well, what does it have to do with rich brain or changing the brain? Well, if we habitually do something over time, it begins to change the way our brains work. It actually says if you take 10 deep breaths, it actually changes your brain chemistry, right? So there's things that we actually specifically do. So what I've watched, and in some of these interviews I've had with millionaires, people that grow wealth, they typically are doing two things. And there's other things, but these are the primary two. One is the idea of being committed to never-ending learning. I mean, you look at people like Mark Cuban, Warren Buffett, a lot of very wealthy people. I know you do as well. Read sometimes hours a day. I mean, studying. I mean, last year my goal was to read 90 books. I finished with 98. Like, I just realized a lot of people read a lot of books. They do podcasts, great shows like this, and are just constantly educating themselves. Even the fact of being able to have 2,500 interviews, it was a lot of them because they're interested in our investments. And I would ask questions specifically around habits or what they're doing or things like that. And so this idea of never-ending learning, I think a good way to look at it is, you make money in your job, you make money in your business, you make money in your investing, but your part-time job, 20 hours, a lot of your time should be spent just learning new skills, learning new information, learning things. Because when I read, and it doesn't have to be just in investing, it's like I read a biography about Teddy Roosevelt or about some other historical figure, and there's application to business, there's application to my life, there's application to different things. And so there's this idea of convergence where you start to just collect information, and then suddenly these patterns, you just recognize these patterns. Oh, this worked for Rockefeller, or this worked for this guy. Like, I can bring these together and I see the world differently and I see investments differently. And so again, it's hard to quantify exactly the process with it. I mean, give steps on how to do that, but almost every wealthy person that I know that is, growing wealth is always learning a lot on a lot of different topics.
And then there's also, I think you talk, and we've talked about this together before, about sort of the reflection of your network. Like you call it networthing, right? Networthing.
Networthing, yes.
Yeah.
Like a tongue twister, yeah. So the idea is, there's a saying that people say is, how you treat your network is how you develop your net worth. And really, I mean, even Robert Kiyosaki, people, they'll say, a lot of people look for great jobs or they look for a great income, but wealthy people really look to grow networks. And if you're somebody who is somebody that is wealthy or wants to be wealthy, I mean, I met someone at an investing event. I'd raised $100,000 for one deal, and I approached this person in such a way that said, "Hey, how is this going in your business, and how could I help in this certain area?" So there was a saying by Jim Rohn that literally somebody had just said at one of these roundtable things we were doing, and they said, "Make yourself valuable to valuable people." And so it came to mind is like, well, this person is a valuable person. How can I help them in some way solve a problem here? And what that led to, I wasn't even thinking initially that I'm going to work with them or partner with them, but it ended up for me going from raising 100,000 for a deal to raising 15 million over the next 18 months. And that was huge. I mean, we literally made a lot of money by doing that, but it just came from putting myself in, how can I show up in a way that I can help someone else that's a valuable person and be a connector. And it's amazing when you do that, how, if you're in the right rooms, I'm sure you have stories of that as well, of how, doors can just open.
Yeah, that's actually interesting, because I was in a group for a few years that you might have heard of, called Genius Network. You heard of that group? With Joe Polish, and there's a lot of really there's a lot of interesting people in that group, as you can imagine. Probably some of the best marketers in the world. That was like the number one thing that everybody said when they first met you. Like, they would say, "Hey, what's your business? What do you do? What can I do to help you?" Interesting. And I found it really curious at first, but I started to kind of understand what that was all about. But that was sort of what can I do to help you kind of thing. That is networking, or networthing, I guess. There's also a networthing concept that I think of as very interesting. And, people talk about how you're often the product of those people who you are immediately associating with on a regular basis, which, and that you will sort of become that person.
Exactly.
So in my case, that turns me into a 12-year-old girl, I guess, because that's mostly I hang out with mostly my daughters, but
it makes you younger, man. I know you're like Benjamin Button there. You're doing biohacking. So
there you go. But there is something to being around people who are playing tennis at a higher level than you, that make you automatically start to get better and have higher expectations of yourself. I don't know about you, when I was a kid growing up, and I was generally upper middle class, I would say. My dad did pretty well for a kid who was a really poor kid coming from a third world country, in this new world, in the American dream. But you talk about millionaires, right? What the hell is a millionaire anyway? Right? I mean, a millionaire, the guy literally I live next to, there's on my, in this house, right behind me here is a guy who bought John Cleese's old house, which was a horse pasture, or a horse farm. And he converted all the stables into garages, and he's got $500 million worth of cars there. That's not where he lives. He's one of the founders of the cell phone industry. He's a billionaire. The interesting thing is that when you're around people like that, you kind of realize, I'm not that big of a deal. I'm really not. I mean, I used to live in a neighborhood that probably I was like a little bit big, like when I was in Chicago, that I was probably more sort of on the, maybe on the higher end of the block, so to speak. But now I am definitely like not that guy. And what that does to you is it makes you realize like, oh man, maybe you're successful, but there is a seriously long runway here that you have just hit the precipice of, and you're not even close to where you think it could go. And what that does to you psychologically, I think, is change your vision of where you could be yourself. Because if the people around you are all like less successful than you and you're the richest guy in the room, it's like hard to see. It's hard to envision something bigger. But anyway,
it's a really great point. That's another part of it as well. So there's the adding value to others, but there's also, like you've said, the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And I think it's really true, Buck, in every area of life. If I'm like, I want to grow my health, right?
Right.
I know we keep talking health and biohacking. Like I get around people that are in better shape than I am. People that are more active. I'm going to start eating better. I'm going to start exercising more just because I'm around them.
Yeah.
Find people that, I could probably look at any listener and say, well, who are the 5 people, maybe not your kids, but, outside your family, who you're spending time with? And, your net worth's probably pretty similar, right? If you really are the average of that. It's the same with spirituality. It's the same in other things. So I think you're, to your point exactly, being in rooms that are at the next level. And this is that one thing I think for your audience as well. What I've realized, one of the most transformational relationships a passive investor can have. So this is, again, net worth more than 2 million. Somebody who's like, I'm retired, semi-retired, I'm looking to just do more passive investing, is other passive investors that have been doing it longer. Because there's a deal flow that's shared. And in finance, really everybody, as much as like, I want to be unbiased and just, I really want to help. I know that's really your heart too, Buck, is you're just here doing this because you want to help people. And obviously, we have families and things that we're, providing for, whatever, but we want people to do the right thing, whether it's already or somebody else's. But the only people that really aren't biased at all in finance are passive investors, people that invest. And so when someone, and we recently started a group that does this, but basically we just share, here's a group I've worked with for 10 years. Here's why I like them. Or here's a group that, somebody share, well, here's what's going on with this investor. I would never work with these guys for this reason. And so it's a way to share information, and it's a way to collaborate to where you can grow. But it's the same principle of just being in the room with amazing people. So I think that is something that most people miss, and they think that they can do it on their own. And I think, especially if you're a passive investor, whatever you're doing, or you're a business person, whatever, getting in groups. I mean, you're in networking groups. I'm in networking groups. I think we met in a networking group as well. There was a networking group where I was like, oh, I've heard of you, Buck. And it was at an entrepreneurs group. And so, anyway, so it's neat how if we want to change an area of our life by getting in rooms with people that are at the next level, it will not automatically, but it will show us how we can get to the next level.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
We are continuing to create in the space. My passion really is to create resources and opportunities for people to grow their wealth. And so my first book, Fire Yourself, became an Amazon bestseller. It really is just a guide on different alternative assets. If somebody's like, how do I start investing, and how do I get involved outside of Wall Street? And I was an investment advisor for a few years as well. While I was doing medical sales, I was doing that on the side as my side hustle. And I realized, man, I'm like, I can't in good faith put people into these Wall Street investments. It doesn't really serve people. And so with the book, with the Rich Brain book, I'm really excited to be creating that. We're continuing. We've got our mastermind called the Wealth Forum that we're doing. We're continuing to find new investment deals in real estate, outside of real estate. I think lately it's been interesting. The last couple of years, we've slowed down on a lot of our real estate deals. The last couple of years, we're just starting. We're seeing some pretty good deals starting to come available now that are pretty significantly discounted. So we're starting to get into more deals now. And then for the last couple of years, we've done a lot of non-real estate stuff. It's more cash flow type of stuff. And that's the thing, I think, since rates have risen, it's harder to find cash flow, which is really for people that are trying to leave a job or replace expenses. And I talk about this in my book. I think cash flow for a lot of people is absolutely life changing, because that's how they actually are able to cover their living expenses and get out of their job or get out of their whatever they're doing. If somebody's net worth of 5 million, or maybe cash flow isn't as important, right? But having different opportunities that either provide cash flow, appreciation, or tax benefits, or maybe all three, is important. So we're continuing to education and continue to find deals.
Where are you finding cash flow right now?
We're finding it, we love businesses for this reason.
Yeah,
We're kind of early to this space. I've been doing a lot of research. A friend of mine might be a good contact for you. His name is Walker Dybel, wrote a book called Buy Then Build. It's a private equity book on just basically, he's got a group called the Acquisition Lab that helps people to buy businesses.
Yeah.
And so I have a couple friends that are really experts in the e-commerce space. We're looking at buying some of these businesses. A lot of them sell for 3 to 5 times profit.
Sure.
So that means if you find a business that's 3 times profit, it generates more than $1 million a year. You're basically buying at like a 35 cap rate, right? So this stuff does exist, and there's ways you can finance them. And so, again, there, you can say, hey, there's more risk here, but again, every risk is dependent on the people involved, the market, the experience. So there's other things there as well. So I think having some diversity is good, but businesses are great. Oil and gas, we're doing a fair amount in that space. We've done some VC stuff, which isn't necessarily, cash flow, but I would say oil and gas, and then private businesses.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, certainly. For the M&A side, you should talk to Zolfia sometimes if you want. Obviously, that was like he was doing that stuff, mergers and acquisitions for JP Morgan, then obviously ran that sovereign wealth run for many years. So he may be a good resource for you guys on that as well. So
yeah, I'll connect them. Yeah, I know you guys have done airplanes and all.
We're doing some of that stuff. We're doing some aviation, looking kind of, it's a tricky space. I mean, anytime you get out of, real estate itself, as we've discovered in the last, couple years, has got some risks related to it. And particularly it's because of the use of leverage, right? And sometimes those things can be problematic if you're in a big, environment of rising interest rates and that, so on and so forth. But the thing about real estate is that it incredibly, you see the thing, right? It's sitting there right in front of you, and you could drive by it, and it's like, there's not a lot of there's not a ton of variables. There's variables to the extent that you need to operate the thing well and all that kind of thing. But the challenge with businesses, what I have found, is that they're often end up being very there's a lot of variables. And ironically, the smaller the business, the greater the risk. Zolfi says he wouldn't even, in his opinion, of course, it's just his opinion, but he says he would not even consider buying a business for less than $50 million because of the fact that there is a level at which you want to get to the point where it's not dependent on one or two key individuals. And if you're in that scenario, then it takes a lot of the risk off the table. So we've certainly thought about it, but you're going to buy a $50 million business, and you're going to raise, at least $30 million of capital to do that. And you got to find the right thing to do. So, but like you said, there's definitely many different ways to approach this stuff. And, so again, the book, though, the book is The Rich Brain. Is it already out?
It's not. I'm writing it as we speak. So
okay.
In the process. It should be out this fall. And again, it's my second book, and I may go the traditional publishing route. I'm just trying to, again, gather. I'm trying to talk about it on shows so I can kind of clarify some of the thoughts and get the word out a little bit.
Cool.
They say it's not hard to write a book, but just selling books. You got to let people know what you're doing along the way. And if I talk about the topic, everybody's like, "Oh, that's really awesome! Like, I love it." And you got this research and everything.
Yeah, sure.
Got to be able to share it. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, great, Bronson. It was good talking to you, and as always, you bring a great value to people. I appreciate you being on the show.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and look forward to connecting soon.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Hope you enjoyed it. And just a reminder, there's lots of stuff coming through the Wealth Formula Accredited Investor Club. If you've not joined, you really need to join now, because there is a great potential opportunity that you'll need to be onboarded for ahead of coming in August. Again, that's Wealth Formula Go to Accredited Investor Club and get onboarded. That's it for me this week on Wealth Formula Podcast. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always, consult your own financial team before making any investment. See you next time.